amazing introduction. You know, as I look around the audience today, I saw something that gave me a tremendous amount of pride. And not only the wonderful turnout from all of you guys, but the children in the audience, right? Because this nation will be theirs soon. They are here as part of the Defend Freedom Tour. And our solemn pledge with Concerned Veterans for America is to make sure that we hand you a country that is strong and powerful and will be for the next 150, 200 years. That's our mission. And so it gives me great pride to share this day with you guys. About 3 years ago, I was a wounded veteran, recently retired, medically retired from the Army. It was my very first trip to the Veterans Administration Hospital. And as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw this 91-year-old man trying to get out of his car using a walker. So I went over, I helped him, I grabbed him by the arm. He told me his name, and I said, "Hey, sir, how you doing?" He said, through our conversation, I had learned that this was a World War II veteran that was wounded in Bastogne. His physician had taken a shelling, and he had shrapnel in the right side of his leg, all the way up through his back. Never once did he seek treatment for it. He came home from the war, he put his boots and his uniform in the closet, he stowed his rifle, and he went on with his life, like so many people in the Greatest Generation did. So I helped him, arm in arm, we walked to the door together slowly. I opened the door for him, let him go first up to the counter, and he said to the woman, "You know, I'm having a lot of problems with the shrapnel in my body, and I need help. For the first time in 50 years, I'm asking for help." And he got a sort of vanilla reply from the person at the VA saying, "Well, did you put a claim in 1944? Did you file the right paperwork?" I just thought to myself, looking, I'm like, he didn't know what to say. He doesn't know how to navigate the system. He's 91 years old. She said, "Well, you can go online and file a claim." Still, it wasn't really computing for him. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that the VA was even an institution in 1942. So how the heck would he have been able to put in a claim in the first place? Okay, so it was there. Thank you. Either way, this gentleman was not receiving the care that he needed at that point in time, after 40 years of being home and wounded. And I saw him standing there at the counter, a 91-year-old war veteran, in tears. And I vowed right there at that moment that I would never, ever let that happen again. And that's ultimately why I partnered with Concerned Veterans for America, because I believe wholeheartedly in their name and their pledge in this tour, and taking action is important to me. So it's not just about going on the media and talking about the issues. It's not just about writing op-eds or writing books. It's about getting out there and meeting with wonderful people like yourselves who care about the direction of this nation. The taking action is critically important to me, and that's ultimately why I'm here with you today. But 12 years ago, I was just a college student, a kid whose extent of his responsibilities was probably drinking beer, getting to class on time, writing papers. I woke up one morning in September, beer cans all around. I stood up off my couch, some kind of fell on the ground, walked over to the TV, turned it on, just in time to see a plane crash into the South Tower. I mean, we all remember that day, right? And we remember the survivors walking out with that gray dust on them, their eyes hauled out, 1,000-yard stare. I remember the people tumbling from the buildings, falling to their deaths. Remember the first responders, firefighters, police officers running into the fray to save people's lives, and in many cases sacrificing their own. And I knew that at that moment, my life was at a crossroads. I could either continue down the path of a listless college student with no sense of purpose or mission, or I could take action and I could get in the fight. So about 4 years later, I found myself in Afghanistan at 24 years old, leading 40 guys in combat. And as a young leader at 24, not only are you responsible for your men, you're responsible for their families as well, and ultimately their lives. It's a tremendous responsibility for a young kid. But yet, that's the situation that we put America's sons and daughters in every day in this great nation. So June 10, 2006 was what I call my Alive Day. It's a day that I believe I was given a second chance on life. I had 24 guys on the ground. We had established an observation post right in between the mountainous border region of Afghanistan and Pakistan. We were overwatching the roads coming from Pakistan into Afghanistan, trying to make sure that the enemy wasn't moving weapons into the heart of the country. Ultimately, we were trying to protect the people there. And that morning, as the sun crested the mountains, we started getting hit with airburst mortars. Immediately, I was knocked unconscious within the first minute of the engagement. I woke up to my platoon sergeant screaming at me that he had shrapnel in his back, a squad leader that had taken a bullet to the leg, and one of my team leaders, his team leader, with arterial bleeding to the arm, and 13 other casualties within 60 seconds. As a young platoon leader, when you look to your platoon sergeant, he's screaming at you that he's got a shrapnel injury to his back, and that we're in danger of being overrun. You know it's a bad day as a leader, especially because your platoon sergeant is your lifeline for a young guy like me. I remember looking at my platoon sergeant and, "Hey, Sergeant Greason, what's the play here? What do we do?" And he looked at me with this like incredulous look on his face. He was like, "Oh heck, sir, I don't know. Shoot back." and I, as a platoon leader, as a lieutenant, if you're shooting back, it's not a good thing. It's not a good day because my weapon is the radio. And so as the fire kept coming in, I lay there on my back. I just had my bell rung. Treetops were exploding all around me. I mean, just exploding. I was watching my guys as if it was in slow motion, bleeding out on the ground. I remember one of my team leaders, a young team leader named Tim Stalter, had slapped me to wake me up. And the first thing he said as these trees and bullets and rounds were impacting everywhere was a big smile on his face. He said, "Hey, sir." I'm like, "Yeah?" He's like, "You got blown up." I'm like, "Okay." And like I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I was not cut out for this kind of stuff. I brought a blow dryer and hair gel to basic training. Okay? I read Harry Potter. It's my favorite series of books. So it's not like I wasn't a molded warrior from the time I was born. I wasn't born with a helmet on my head and combat boots on my feet. But Tim Stalter grabbed me on the back of my body armor and he picked me up. And I'm a bigger guy. Tim's a small guy. He carried me over to my truck so that I could get on the radio, call for help, call in fire, call in air support. And I remember as I was on the radio calling for help, the enemy directly east of us, while they were hitting us with mortars, had emplaced three machine guns, 3 cruiser machine guns on ridge lines directly east of us. They had us in a terrible crossfire while they were hitting us with indirect. And as they were doing that, 2 assault elements came down from either hill, rushed at our position as fast as humanly possible. It was like a giant, crab claw coming at us. And I knew that we were in big, big trouble. And as the enemy was charging up our hill, I thought of Joshua Chamberlain and that heroic bayonet charge that he ordered. And I said to myself, okay, all right, I'm going to give the order to fix bayonets. And right before I gave the command, I realized, well, darn it, the Army doesn't issue us bayonets anymore. But if you want to find out what happened that day to the men of Outlaw Platoon, you have to read the book. And I'm not gonna ruin anything for you. But Tim Stalter came back after 485 days of combat, and just to put it into perspective, Easy Company, the 101st Airborne, jumped into D-Day and fought to Hitler's Eagle's Nest in less time than 485 days. But that's the deployment that we were on. So when Tim Stalter got back from the war, his war truly began. Tim was a kid that had seen the worst of combat. He had suffered tremendously from post-traumatic stress. He had a terrible traumatic brain injury, had been blown up a number of times, was having real issues with sleeping, had terrible anxiety attacks, nightmares, couldn't remember things. He was a different person. War changes us. And he had become estranged from his wife. His wife feared that he may at some point in one of his flashbacks injure one of the children, so she moved out and left him. Tim went to the VA, and he got a rating back from the VA at 10%. chronic post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury, 10%. And I'm not here to rail against the VA. I think the VA does a good job for treatment once you can get through some of the bureaucratic barriers that are in place. But 10% rating basically means, yes, we acknowledge that you served and we will see you at the VA. It wasn't up to par for what Tim had actually gone through. So he put in an appeals packet. Never heard back from his appeals packet. We tried to support him. I did as his commander, along with some of my non-commissioned officers for 5 years. 5 years he waited to hear anything back from the VA. And so January of this year, I got a call on the phone from Tim's cell phone number. And I was given the news that Tim had taken his own life in January. Ladies and gentlemen, this nation is hemorrhaging people whose nobility and selflessness has been abused to the point that is breaking them. We have got to do something about that. Concerned Veterans of America is doing something about that. Veterans embody everything that's great about this nation. I don't have to tell this crowd that. But that's all the more reason why we need to fight so passionately for it. We need to lock arms, and we need, ultimately what we need is that indomitable power of our collective spirit. And we need DC and we need the folks at the VA to hear that together as one, united. You know, Outlaw Platoon, we didn't win every battle that we were in because we were exemplary. We were just ordinary, you know? We had guys from the north, guys from the south. I had guys that were atheists, guys that were Catholics, guys that were liberal, guys that were conservative. It didn't matter. We all figured out a way to bond together and get the mission done. And that's what we can bring to the fight. We, in this room, have the potential to change the course of American history and change the way that our direction is headed. And that's why it's critically important for you to join Concerned Veterans for America. They're a great group. And I know that with your help, we'll be able to accomplish anything. So thanks so much for your time. God bless you. I appreciate it.